without any further ado, let's move on into that. So here's two comparison infographics that both detail. On the left-hand side, you'll see the regenerative type of crop management protocol: crop removal, feed the soil, feed the plant, feed the soil, feed the plant, take crop removal. Versus on the right-hand side, you'll see the typical industrial model: crop removal, feed the crop, herbicide, nematicide, feed the crop, crop removal, right? So these are the general sort of protocols that are happening on farms, and that is used to, essentially produce crops and get them to market. But when you're looking at restoration of soil, you can't separate restoration of soil without the restoration of plant health. They go hand in hand. And so if you can restore plants, they will actually help you to build soils. And there's two ways to really look at that. And that is, you can feed the soil to feed the plant, which is the traditional way that regenerative and organic cropping systems have been done. But there's a opposite way to look at that, and that's feed the plant in order to feed the soil. This is more of a modern approach, which has its benefits. And one of the things that personally I've experienced over the last 20 years of being involved in organic and regenerative system is that the guys that focus on feeding the soil to feed the plant do well in the long term. But if you're looking for short-term benefits and you're looking to take the first step on a long journey into regenerative agriculture, you might want to start trying to feed the plant in order to feed the soil, because you'll be able to access immediate benefits. And in often cases, those would be monetary benefits as well as visual plant response in the field. So one of the keys to this process is what we refer to as crop input antagonism. And this takes on a lot of forms. And you'll hear me in private conversations, consultations, presentations, sidebar discussions, sitting around, having a beer, dinner, talking about crop input antagonism. And what crop input antagonism means, it goes very deep, right? So in other words, what the plant is trying to do versus what your crop input is doing to the plant. If those two aren't in harmony, or they're only in a partial percentage in harmony, you're not going to be getting the most out of your crop inputs, nor are you going to be getting the most out of your plant performance. And as any good farmer knows, you're dealing in daylight hours on an annual basis and total sunlight units, and trying to optimize photosynthesis in order to produce optimal crops. When you use excess fertilizer, it's been proven over and over that when too much fertilizer is used, this encourages insecticide. It's been proven over and over when excess water is used in agriculture systems, this also increases disease. Many situations where herbicides are used also can tie up micronutrients and are designed to kill soil microbes. Other ag chem products, such as that contain unknown riders such as chloride, fluoride, bromide, sodium, aluminum, arsenic, EDTA, strong pH adjusters, etc. These can also act antagonistic to your crop needs. When we have synergy instead of antagonism with our crop inputs and our crop desires, this is what we mean with crop input synergism, or plant soil matrix synergism. When you have waterlogged soil, you're going to have microbial activity is low, but the microbial activity is going to be typically anaerobic. You're going to need to invest in either protective microbes, or you're going to need to invest in some other form of fungicide from the root zone. Versus if you're in an overly dry soil, you're going to have a similar need for investment in protective molecules, but in a different way. When I use the term plant soil matrix, it's a interface and a back and forth, relationship between plants feeding microbes and microbes feeding plants. When this happens, you gain the following benefits: carbon sequestration, nitrogen fixation, phosphate solubilization, potassium fixation, iron reduction, manganese reduction, and building organic matter. These are well-known, well-studied across the entire realm of agronomy, accepted by American Society of Agronomy as hardcore facts of soil health building. But these processes are coming at us from a real basic level, right? So photosynthesis, right? So what is the byproduct of photosynthesis? Simple sugars. Well, it just so happens that the food for bacteria is also simple sugars. And it also happens that a general food of fungi is bacteria. Food for nematodes is fungi, and so on and so forth. Anyone that studied Elaine Ingham's work or the work of the soil food web has understood that this hierarchy within the plants and soil food web is a really key component to building regenerative agriculture systems. But it's not really considered or discussed that often, is that the greater the amount of sugars that the plants are putting out through their root systems is going to feed an increasing amount of bacteria, which will synergize and over the long term begin to build even larger cropping potential through healthy soils. So once you start to take increased amount of sugars and put them down into the root zone, you can then take this benefit and begin to increase the benefits of soil health. What you have then is the soil and the plant feeding off of one another in a continuous loop towards a positive outcome for you as a grower. So if we can allow nature into the equation and stop getting away and get away from short-circuiting natural reactions, this can help build our farm. And we'll look at some hardcore data in a few minutes on how that's done and why that makes financial sense for everyone. Literally every farmer needs to understand this. So when we refer to as organic molecule synthesis is actually a relatively complex process of higher level carbon molecules being built one on top of another to build healthier soils and healthier plants in coordination with one another. And so as a healthier soil becomes even healthier, the plants become even healthier. And so if you have one without the other, it's very difficult to maintain the other, right? So it's very difficult to have a healthy plant that doesn't create a healthy soil, and it's very difficult to have a healthy soil that won't create a healthy plant. They're linked. If we can begin to capitalize on these organic molecule reactions and time our crop input applications with our growth cycle, we can then capitalize on outcomes inside the soil food web. And how is this done? And there's one easy way that we do this, and this is by working with carbon. And we'll always come back and forth to this common theme that carbon is the missing link in these agricultural systems. What we found is if we only apply enough carbon for the crop, but not for the soil will begin to build itself on its own. In other words, if we identify and feed plant carbon needs instead of soil carbon needs, then then nature will say, okay, you've paid your admission. Now let's put some carbon back into the soil. It's identifying the carbon needs that we'll talk about later in the webinar series on how to do so. But this is a departure from the traditional 15 plus years of organic cropping systems where they all were saying you need to build your organic matter in the soil, need to build organic matter in the soil. That all is true. But it was often maybe being done for many years in a non-economical way. Now we have the opportunity with some of the better formulations and technology that exist to alleviate that and make it more simple and quick.